In the annals of European history, few figures are as enigmatic and formidable as Eleanor of Aquitaine. Born in the early 12th century, she navigated a world dominated by kings, knights, and shifting allegiances, yet she wielded influence far beyond what most women of her era could hope to achieve. Eleanor's life spanned nearly a century, a time marked by political upheaval, crusades, and the growing tension between monarchs and the church. What makes her story particularly fascinating is not merely her proximity to power as queen of both France and England, but the subtle, almost invisible ways she shaped history, influenced culture, and asserted her authority in a society that often denied women formal power. Eleanor's life challenges conventional notions of medieval royalty. She was not content to be a passive consort, a figurehead whose role was limited to producing heirs and attending courtly ceremonies. Instead, she engaged directly in governance, diplomacy, and military strategy, and even played a key role in the cultural flourishing of the period. From her early years in the Duchy of Aquitaine, she exhibited a combination of intelligence, ambition, and political acumen that would define her entire life. Her story offers insights into the complex interplay between gender, power, and politics in medieval Europe, revealing the ways in which an individual, particularly a woman, could navigate constraints to leave a lasting imprint on history. This script will explore Eleanor's life through multiple lenses: her upbringing and early influence, her marriages to kings, her political maneuvering, her role in the Crusades, her cultural patronage, and the enduring legacy she left on European society. Each section will uncover a different facet of her hidden power, showing how Eleanor's story is not just a biography, but a meditation on resilience, intellect, and the subtle ways women have shaped history. Through her life, we can examine themes that resonate today: leadership, influence, agency, and the pursuit of autonomy within restrictive social frameworks. By understanding Eleanor's life, we gain a window into the human capacity to assert power quietly but decisively, to negotiate survival and influence in a world that often seeks to diminish voices like hers. Section 1: The Making of a Powerful Duchess. Eleanor of Aquitaine's story begins not in a palace of kings, but in the Duchy of Aquitaine, a vast and wealthy region in southwestern France. Born around 1122, she inherited the title of Duchess of Aquitaine at the age of 15, following the death of her father, William II. The young Eleanor became one of the most sought-after heiresses in Europe, her vast lands and wealth making her a prize for ambitious monarchs. Yet what stands out is not just her inheritance, but the environment that shaped her intelligence, sophistication, and political awareness. Aquitaine was a unique cultural and political space in medieval Europe. It was prosperous, relatively independent, and renowned for its patronage of literature, music, and the arts. Eleanor grew up surrounded by troubadours, poets, and scholars who celebrated themes of chivalry and courtly love. This cultural richness not only provided her with an education uncommon for women of her time, but also helped cultivate her understanding of how influence could be exercised subtly through language, patronage, and reputation. She learned early that power was not solely enforced through armies and legal authority, but through networks, alliances, and personal charisma. Eleanor's childhood was also defined by careful observation of politics and governance. As the daughter of a ruling duke, she witnessed firsthand the negotiation of land, the balancing of rival noble families, and the delicate diplomacy required to maintain authority. She observed how her father navigated the demands of both the French crown and the local nobility, often relying on strategic marriages, alliances, and negotiations to secure his position. Eleanor absorbed these lessons, developing a keen sense of timing, persuasion, and the subtleties of power dynamics. Her ability to read people, anticipate their actions, and leverage her position would later become hallmarks of her political strategy. Beyond politics and culture, Eleanor's upbringing emphasized autonomy and responsibility. Unlike many young women of her era, who were often confined to the domestic sphere, Eleanor managed substantial estates from an early age. She learned to oversee finances, adjudicate disputes among vassals, and make decisions with lasting consequences. This early exposure to governance imbued her with confidence and a sense of entitlement to exercise authority, traits that would distinguish her later in life. It also fostered a deep understanding of the intricate relationship between wealth, loyalty, and influence, a relationship she would manipulate skillfully as queen of two powerful nations. Eleanor's intelligence was complemented by her awareness of her own social positioning. She understood the value of her reputation, the power of appearances, and the symbolic weight of ceremonies, gestures, and courtly rituals. This insight was particularly important given the gender norms of the 12th century, which largely confined women to roles defined by their relationships to men. Eleanor, however, learned to operate within these constraints while simultaneously bending them. She cultivated alliances with other noblewomen, exercised authority over her lands, and projected an image of elegance and wisdom that reinforced her influence without directly challenging social norms. Her early exposure to literature, philosophy, and legal knowledge also distinguished Eleanor. Unlike many noblewomen who were educated primarily in domestic skills, Eleanor engaged with texts, correspondence, and philosophical discussions. She developed literacy and rhetorical skills that allowed her to engage directly with male rulers, negotiate terms of marriage and inheritance, and assert her interests with sophistication. These capabilities gave her a voice in political matters, a voice that would not be silenced even when she entered the male-dominated courts of France and England. By the time Eleanor became Duchess of Aquitaine, she was already a master of subtle power. Her inheritance and lands made her a key figure in European politics, but her education, intelligence, and social acumen ensured that she was more than a passive heiress. She was a strategist, a patron, and a negotiator, fully aware of how to leverage her assets, material, social, and intellectual, to achieve her goals. The Duchy of Aquitaine was not merely the domain to be ruled. It was a platform from which Eleanor could cultivate influence, shape alliances, and project authority. Eleanor's early life demonstrates that power is not simply inherited. It is cultivated through observation, experience, and strategic engagement with one's environment. From her upbringing, she learned that authority could be exercised in many forms, not only through force or decree, but through cultural patronage, diplomatic skill, and personal reputation. These lessons would underpin her remarkable life, allowing her to navigate marriages to kings, survive political upheaval, and leave an indelible mark on history. Her story reminds us that leadership often begins long before formal titles or public recognition. Eleanor's early years in Aquitaine were the crucible in which her intelligence, ambition, and subtlety were forged, preparing her to become one of the most powerful and enigmatic figures of the Middle Ages. The forgotten queen was already in the making, a woman who understood that true influence often resides not in overt displays of power, but in the quiet mastery of networks, knowledge, and human relationships. Section 2. The Queen of France, Navigating Power in a Foreign Court. At the age of 15, Eleanor of Aquitaine's life took a dramatic turn when she married Louis VII of France, becoming queen consort in one of Europe's most powerful courts. The marriage was politically strategic. It allied the immense wealth and independence of Aquitaine with the French crown, bolstering the monarchy's influence. Yet Eleanor quickly realized that her new environment was filled with intricate politics, rigid hierarchies, and expectations that often conflicted with her own instincts for autonomy and leadership. The French court was a center of power, culture, and ritual, and Eleanor had to navigate this complex world while maintaining her own authority and identity. Upon entering the French court, Eleanor found herself in a setting vastly different from the relatively autonomous duchy she had ruled in Aquitaine. The Capetian monarchy was centralized, hierarchical, and heavily influenced by the Church, which dictated not only religious life, but also social norms and expectations for women of rank. Eleanor was expected to be a paragon of piety and obedience, to produce heirs, and to support her husband's authority. Yet, Eleanor was not content to merely occupy ceremonial roles. She sought to engage with political, cultural, and intellectual life in ways that subtly expanded her influence. One of the most striking aspects of Eleanor's tenure as queen was her role in the Crusade of 1147 to 1149. Both she and Louis VII took part in the Second Crusade, a military expedition aimed at reclaiming territories in the Holy Land from Muslim control. Eleanor's participation was unusual for a queen, especially given the social norms of the 12th century. She traveled with a large retinue, including knights, nobles, and administrators, demonstrating not only her wealth, but also her organizational skills and command. Her presence on the crusade allowed her to wield authority over her own entourage, make strategic decisions in military and diplomatic contexts, and cultivate alliances across borders. However, Eleanor's influence was not always welcomed. The French court was rife with jealousy, suspicion, and intrigue. Many courtiers viewed her assertiveness, intelligence, and charisma as a challenge to the king's authority. Eleanor's willingness to engage directly in matters of governance and diplomacy occasionally created friction with Louis VII and his advisors. Despite these challenges, she navigated these tensions with remarkable skill, using diplomacy, charm, and a deep understanding of courtly politics to maintain her position. She learned early that power in such an environment required subtlety, the ability to act decisively behind the scenes while outwardly conforming to expected roles. Culturally, Eleanor left an indelible mark on the French court. She introduced the refined customs, poetry, and music of Aquitaine, influencing the development of courtly culture throughout France. Eleanor patronized troubadours and poets, fostering an environment in which literature and artistic expression flourished. This cultural engagement was not merely ornamental. It was a means of consolidating her influence, demonstrating sophistication, and shaping the values of the court. Through her patronage, Eleanor projected authority and cultivated loyalty, showing that cultural power could be as significant as political or military authority. Despite her efforts, the marriage between Eleanor and Louis VII was fraught with difficulty. The couple struggled with personal incompatibility, differing temperaments, and political pressures. The lack of a male heir intensified tensions, as the production of a son was considered central to the Queen's duty. Their relationship suffered from disagreements over the conduct of the crusade, courtly alliances, and expectations of obedience. Ultimately, their marriage was annulled in 1152 on the grounds of consanguinity, a decision that reflected both the personal and political complexities of royal unions in medieval Europe. Eleanor's annulment, rather than diminishing her power, provided an opportunity to redefine her position. Freed from the constraints of a marriage that limited her autonomy, she returned to Aquitaine with her vast inheritance intact. This wealth and territorial control made her one of the most influential figures in Europe, capable of shaping alliances, influencing politics, and exercising authority on her own terms. Her experience as Queen of France had honed her political instincts, deepened her understanding of European diplomacy, and provided insights into the mechanisms of power that she would later deploy as Queen of England. During her time in France, Eleanor also demonstrated a remarkable understanding of symbolism and perception. She cultivated an image of regal authority, elegance, and intelligence that made her both respected and envied. She recognized that appearances could be a form of power. The way one carried oneself, the sophistication of one's court, and the patronage of arts and culture all contributed to authority. Eleanor's awareness of image and perception allowed her to navigate a patriarchal system with confidence, asserting influence without overt confrontation. Eleanor's life in France illustrates that power is multifaceted. While she held the title of queen, her true influence lay in her ability to observe, adapt, and act within a complex network of relationships and expectations. She understood that authority could be exercised through presence, persuasion, and cultural patronage as much as through formal decree. Her experience at the French court shaped her into a ruler capable of navigating even the most challenging political landscapes, preparing her for the more tumultuous and high-stakes environment she would later encounter as Queen of England. In retrospect, Eleanor's tenure as Queen of France was a formative period that combined personal challenge, political education, and cultural influence. It was a time when she learned the subtleties of diplomacy, the power of perception, and the strategic use of wealth and cultural authority. These lessons would serve her well in later years, allowing her to assert independence, shape European politics, and influence generations of rulers. The forgotten queen was quietly but unmistakably building the foundation of her enduring legacy. Section 3. Queen of England. Power and influence in a new realm. Eleanor of Aquitaine's life took another dramatic turn in 1152, just weeks after her annulment from Louis VII of France. She married Henry Plantagenet, soon to be Henry II of England, forging one of the most consequential alliances in medieval European history. This union was not merely a marriage of convenience. It united vast territories, Aquitaine, Normandy, Anjou, and Maine, with the English crown, creating a realm of unprecedented scale and power. Eleanor's position as Queen Consort of England provided her with a broader stage on which to exercise influence. Yet it also brought new challenges in the form of dynastic politics, rebellious sons, and a king whose ambitions often overshadowed those of his queen. Upon her arrival in England, Eleanor quickly recognized the differences between the French and English courts. England was decentralized, with a strong feudal system in which local barons held significant authority. The court itself was less sophisticated than that of Paris, with customs and political mechanisms that required careful navigation. Eleanor brought with her the experience, education, and cultural sophistication of Aquitaine and the French court, immediately enhancing the cultural life of the English realm. She introduced refined courtly practices, patronized poets and musicians, and cultivated an image of elegance and intellect that distinguished her from other members of the English nobility. Her court became a hub of political, cultural, and intellectual activity, reflecting Eleanor's awareness that power was not only exercised through force, but also through culture and perception. Eleanor's influence extended far beyond cultural contributions. She played an active role in political affairs, advising Henry II, mediating disputes, and overseeing her own territories with remarkable acumen. Aquitaine remained under her direct control, and she managed its affairs with a combination of diplomacy and firmness. This autonomy was unusual for a queen, demonstrating Eleanor's exceptional capacity to navigate patriarchal structures while retaining authority over her inherited lands. Her ability to exercise independent power created both admiration and tension at the English court, where her assertiveness sometimes conflicted with the ambitions of Henry II and his advisors. One of the most significant episodes of Eleanor's life as Queen of England involved her role in the upbringing and future careers of her children. She bore 8 children, including future kings Richard I and John. Eleanor recognized that her children were both political tools and potential rivals to her own influence, and she invested heavily in their education, alliances, and ambitions. She provided guidance, arranged marriages, and cultivated relationships that would shape the future of Europe. Her ability to balance maternal affection with political strategy reflected her deep understanding of power, inheritance, and dynastic politics. However, Eleanor's relationship with Henry II was far from harmonious. The king was ambitious, often ruthless, and deeply concerned with consolidating his authority. Conflicts arose over governance, influence at court, and the ambitions of their sons. Eleanor's political acumen sometimes clashed with Henry's desire for centralized control, leading to periods of estrangement and tension. In 1173, these tensions erupted into open conflict when Eleanor supported a rebellion by her sons against their father. This rebellion, fueled in part by Eleanor's desire to secure power and autonomy for her children, resulted in her imprisonment for over a decade. Yet even in confinement, Eleanor's influence endured. She maintained correspondence with allies, managed aspects of her territories through trusted agents, and prepared for the eventual restoration of her power. Eleanor's imprisonment underscores the precarious nature of female power in the medieval world. While she was exceptionally intelligent, wealthy, and capable, her authority was always contingent on her relationship with male rulers, first her husband, then her sons, and occasionally her adversaries. Yet Eleanor's life demonstrates that even under severe constraints, women could exercise agency through networks of loyalty, knowledge, and strategic alliances. Her ability to endure hardship without losing influence is a testament to her resilience and understanding of power's subtle mechanics. After her release in 1189, Eleanor emerged more politically formidable than ever. With her son Richard I ascending to the English throne, she assumed an active role in governing the kingdom during his absence on the Third Crusade. Eleanor's regency showcased her exceptional administrative skills as she managed finances, maintained law and order, and upheld the loyalty of the nobility. Her leadership during this period demonstrated that her authority was not merely symbolic. She was a capable ruler in her own right, able to exercise power effectively even in a male-dominated society. Eleanor's influence also extended to diplomacy. She negotiated alliances, arranged marriages, and mediated disputes across Europe, demonstrating a sophisticated understanding of the interconnected nature of medieval politics. Her extensive network of contacts, built over decades in both France and England, allowed her to shape outcomes in ways that rivaled those of kings and princes. Eleanor's diplomatic skill was rooted in her knowledge of culture, her strategic use of patronage, and her ability to read the ambitions and weaknesses of others. Beyond politics and culture, Eleanor's life as Queen of England reveals the personal dimensions of power. She cultivated a reputation for intelligence, dignity, and courage, inspiring loyalty and respect from allies and fear or envy from rivals. Her ability to combine personal magnetism with strategic thinking made her a singular figure in European history, a queen who exercised power across multiple domains simultaneously: cultural, political, familial, and diplomatic. Ultimately, Eleanor's tenure as Queen of England highlights the complexity of female authority in the Middle Ages. Her story is one of extraordinary ambition, strategic insight, and resilience. She demonstrated that power could be exercised through multiple channels: cultural influence, territorial control, diplomatic negotiation, and familial guidance, even in societies structured to limit women's authority. Eleanor's life in England solidified her reputation as one of history's most remarkable queens, a woman whose intelligence, independence, and vision allowed her to leave a lasting imprint on European history. In reflecting on Eleanor of Aquitaine's life during this period, it becomes clear that her influence was both tangible and enduring. She reshaped the cultural landscape of England, guided dynastic politics across generations, and demonstrated that authority could be exercised with subtlety, strategy, and sophistication. Eleanor's time as Queen of England was not merely a continuation of her previous role in France. It was a transformative period that showcased her capacity for resilience, leadership, and vision, cementing her legacy as a ruler whose power transcended the limitations imposed by her gender and the expectations of her era. Section 4. The Later Years: Crusades, Regency, and Lasting Legacy. As Eleanor of Aquitaine entered the later stages of her life, her influence and ambition remained undiminished. Even as the trials of age and the shifting tides of politics presented new challenges, she continued to exercise remarkable power, guiding the fates of kingdoms and shaping the course of European history. One of the most pivotal episodes of this period was her involvement in the Crusades, an undertaking that demanded both courage and political acumen. In 1189, Eleanor's son Richard I ascended to the English throne, taking the title of Richard the Lionheart. Almost immediately, Richard prepared to leave for the Third Crusade, aiming to reclaim Jerusalem from Muslim control. During his absence, Eleanor assumed the role of regent, effectively governing England and ensuring the stability of the kingdom. This responsibility was immense. She had to maintain loyalty among nobles, manage finances, and oversee judicial matters in a society accustomed to male leadership. Her experience as a ruler of Aquitaine and her previous engagement in English politics enabled her to perform these duties with skill and authority, demonstrating her enduring capacity to wield power independently. Eleanor's regency was marked by both diplomacy and pragmatism. She understood the delicate balance required to keep the barons loyal while safeguarding the interests of her son and the crown. She mediated disputes between rival factions, granted privileges where necessary, and took decisive action against any challenges to her authority. Her letters from this period reveal a woman deeply aware of the stakes, strategically reinforcing her son's reign while subtly asserting her own influence. Eleanor's political maneuvering during Richard's absence illustrates that even in a patriarchal society, a determined and capable woman could govern effectively, leaving a legacy that extended far beyond her immediate family. Beyond governance, Eleanor remained deeply involved in the wider European political landscape. Her daughters' marriages were arranged to secure alliances with powerful families, further intertwining the destinies of kingdoms. For instance, her daughter Joan of England became Queen of Sicily, while another daughter, Eleanor, was wed to Alfonso VIII of Castile. Through these alliances, Eleanor ensured that her influence extended across the continent, shaping diplomacy and succession in ways that reinforced her family's power. Her ability to strategically use marriage as a tool of political consolidation reflects her deep understanding of both personal and geopolitical dynamics. Eleanor's personal resilience was also evident during this period. Having endured decades of political turbulence, including her imprisonment by Henry II for supporting her son's rebellion, she emerged from confinement with renewed determination. Her authority during Richard's regency demonstrates a rare combination of patience, foresight, and adaptability, qualities essential for navigating the treacherous landscape of medieval politics. Even in old age, Eleanor refused to be sidelined, leveraging her experience, connections, and intellect to maintain influence over the affairs of kingdoms far beyond her own immediate domain. The Crusades themselves, while primarily military campaigns, had cultural and political repercussions that Eleanor skillfully navigated. Her support of Richard and the financing of his expedition reflected not only maternal loyalty, but also a broader vision of European unity under Christian leadership. Eleanor's involvement in these events positioned her as a key figure in the interplay between secular and religious authority, highlighting her ability to operate across different spheres of power. Her engagement with the Crusades further cemented her reputation as a woman whose ambitions were as broad as they were sophisticated. Eleanor's later years also involved a significant degree of mentorship. She guided her younger grandchildren, providing them with education, advice, and insights into the responsibilities of leadership. This role reinforced her legacy, ensuring that her knowledge, strategic vision, and cultural sensibilities were transmitted to the next generation. Eleanor's focus on education and the cultivation of intellect within her family underscores her recognition that true influence is not only exercised through immediate power, but also through shaping the minds and values of those who will inherit authority in the future. In reflecting on Eleanor's final decades, it is evident that her life was characterized by an extraordinary blend of political acumen, cultural patronage, and personal resilience. She navigated the treacherous waters of medieval Europe with a combination of diplomacy, strategy, and charisma, ensuring that her influence extended far beyond the temporal confines of her titles. Her ability to adapt to changing circumstances, whether through governance, regency, or familial alliances, demonstrates a sophisticated understanding of power that few contemporaries could match. Eleanor's death in 1204 marked the end of an era, but her legacy continued to resonate across Europe. She was buried at Fontevraud Abbey in Anjou, alongside her husband Henry II and her son Richard I, a testament to the enduring significance of her family's dynastic accomplishments. However, her true legacy extends beyond tombs and titles. It lies in the enduring impact of her political, cultural, and diplomatic contributions. Eleanor's life challenged conventional notions of female authority, showing that a woman of intelligence, determination, and vision could shape the destiny of nations and leave an indelible mark on history. Historians today continue to study Eleanor of Aquitaine, not only for her accomplishments, but also for the example she set as a powerful and autonomous female figure in a male-dominated society. Her life serves as a reminder that influence comes in many forms, through governance, patronage, mentorship, diplomacy, and the careful cultivation of alliances. Eleanor's story invites reflection on the nature of power, the role of women in shaping history, and the ways in which ambition, intelligence, and resilience can transcend the limitations imposed by society. Ultimately, Eleanor of Aquitaine's later years illustrate the full spectrum of her capabilities. She was a mother, a regent, a diplomat, a patron of culture, and a strategist who left a lasting imprint on the medieval world. Her ability to exercise authority with both subtlety and decisiveness, to navigate complex political landscapes, and to ensure her family's continued prominence speaks to the depth of her vision and the breadth of her influence. Eleanor's life demonstrates that power is not solely defined by titles or formal authority. It is measured by the ability to shape events, guide others, and leave a lasting impact on the world. In contemplating Eleanor's achievements, it becomes clear that her story transcends the confines of her time. She was not merely a queen consort or a mother. She was a visionary leader whose strategies and insights continue to captivate historians and scholars. The legacy of Eleanor of Aquitaine endures as a testament to the extraordinary potential of women to influence history, asserting that intelligence, courage, and determination can leave an enduring mark even in the most challenging of circumstances. Section 5. The Rebellion of the Sons. Eleanor's bold defiance. One of the most striking episodes in Eleanor of Aquitaine's life occurred during the rebellion of her sons against their father, Henry II of England. This dramatic conflict not only tested her political acumen, but also demonstrated her willingness to take extraordinary risks to protect her children and assert her own influence. Eleanor's involvement in the revolt highlights her strategic mind, her daring nature, and her ability to navigate the treacherous waters of medieval dynastic politics. The rebellion, which began in the 1170s, was sparked by tensions between Henry II and his sons over inheritance and autonomy. Henry had divided his vast territories, spanning England, Aquitaine, and parts of France, among his heirs, but disputes quickly arose over the division of power and the desire for independence. Richard, Geoffrey, and Henry the young king all felt constrained by their father's control, leading to mounting frustration and eventual insurrection. It was during this volatile period that Eleanor played a central, if often overlooked, role in the unfolding drama. Eleanor's participation in the rebellion was both direct and symbolic. She supported her sons financially and logistically, providing resources and guidance that bolstered their campaign against their father. Her actions were not simply maternal. They were calculated measures to protect her family's interests and to assert her own position within the political hierarchy. Eleanor understood that the rebellion carried enormous risks, including the potential loss of her titles, lands, and even her freedom. Yet she chose to act decisively, demonstrating a willingness to challenge traditional gender norms and the authority of one of the most powerful kings in Europe. The rebellion unfolded with complex strategies, secret alliances, and shifting loyalties. Eleanor leveraged her influence over her supporters in Aquitaine, rallying nobles and allies to the cause of her sons. Her intimate knowledge of the political landscape, gained from decades of experience as Duchess of Aquitaine and Queen of England, enabled her to coordinate movements, communicate plans, and anticipate her father-in-law's countermeasures. In doing so, she became an active participant in one of the most significant familial conflicts of the 12th century, proving that her authority extended beyond ceremonial or domestic spheres. Despite Eleanor's efforts, the rebellion faced numerous challenges. Henry II, a formidable strategist and ruler, responded with a combination of military force, diplomacy, and punitive measures. Castles were besieged, armies mobilized, and alliances tested. Yet, Eleanor's involvement remained crucial in sustaining the morale and cohesion of the insurgent forces. Her presence signaled legitimacy and determination, reinforcing the resolve of her sons and their supporters. In many ways, Eleanor's participation exemplified a mother's unwavering commitment, tempered by a statesman's understanding of power dynamics. The consequences of the rebellion were profound and enduring. Ultimately, Henry II suppressed the revolt, demonstrating his authority and reaffirming control over his territories. However, Eleanor's role did not go unnoticed. She was imprisoned for her involvement, confined for nearly 15 years in various locations across England. This period of captivity was both a personal and political setback, yet it did not diminish her stature or her influence. Eleanor endured imprisonment with resilience, maintaining her dignity and the loyalty of her allies. Her ability to survive such adversity underscores the depth of her fortitude and her capacity for strategic patience. During her imprisonment, Eleanor continued to wield influence in subtle and indirect ways. She maintained correspondence with allies and family members, providing advice and guidance that shaped ongoing political decisions. Her experience and insight ensured that even in confinement, she remained a central figure in the dynastic affairs of England and Aquitaine. This period also illustrates a key aspect of Eleanor's character: her recognition that power can be exercised in multiple forms, not solely through direct action, but through communication, mentorship, and strategic positioning. The rebellion also highlights Eleanor's nuanced understanding of loyalty and diplomacy. She balanced familial allegiance with political pragmatism, navigating the delicate terrain between defiance and reconciliation. Even after her release, Eleanor continued to influence her sons, particularly Richard and John, guiding them in matters of governance, alliance building, and cultural patronage. Her ability to reconcile past conflicts with present objectives reflects a sophisticated approach to leadership, combining emotional intelligence with political foresight. Beyond the immediate political implications, Eleanor's role in the rebellion carries broader cultural and historical significance. It challenges the conventional narrative of medieval women as passive figures, confined to domestic spaces and ceremonial functions. Eleanor's active engagement demonstrates that women of intelligence, courage, and vision could exercise considerable power, even in the face of overwhelming opposition. Her story provides a lens through which to understand the dynamics of medieval politics, gender, and family, revealing the intricate interplay of personal ambition, loyalty, and strategic calculation. In examining Eleanor's involvement in her son's rebellion, one can also see the enduring theme of resilience that defines her life. She navigated successive challenges, dynastic conflicts, imprisonment, and the limitations imposed by gender, while maintaining her influence and pursuing her objectives. Eleanor's strategic support of her sons, despite the risks, underscores her commitment to family, her political acumen, and her capacity to act decisively when circumstances demanded. Her actions during this period serve as a testament to the depth of her character and the breadth of her influence. Ultimately, the rebellion of her sons illustrates a central truth about Eleanor of Aquitaine. Her power was multifaceted, exercised through both direct action and subtle guidance. She was a mother, a strategist, a negotiator, and a cultural patron, capable of navigating the complexities of medieval politics with skill and determination. Eleanor's involvement in the revolt, despite the personal costs, reflects her understanding that leadership often requires courage, risk, and an unwavering commitment to principles and family. Her life during this turbulent period remains an enduring testament to the extraordinary potential of women to shape history, challenge conventions, and leave a lasting mark on the world. Section 6. Release, Reconciliation, and Renewed Influence. After nearly 15 years of imprisonment, Eleanor of Aquitaine emerged not as a diminished figure, but as a woman whose resilience, wisdom, and influence had only grown. Her release, orchestrated in the 1180s under changing political circumstances, marked a critical turning point in her life and reign. Eleanor's ability to reassert herself in the complex political world of England and France provides a fascinating insight into her strategic mind, her understanding of loyalty, and her enduring capacity to shape history. Eleanor's release was prompted in part by the shifting dynamics within the Angevin Empire. By the early 1180s, Henry II faced internal challenges, including unrest among his sons, external threats from neighboring kingdoms, and the practical difficulties of maintaining control over his expansive territories. In this context, Eleanor's continued imprisonment had become politically disadvantageous. Her wealth, influence in Aquitaine, and ties to the European nobility were too valuable to be left dormant. Releasing Eleanor allowed Henry II to leverage her experience, her alliances, and her reputation in service of the kingdom's stability. Although their relationship remained complex, tinged with past conflicts and mutual pragmatism. Upon her release, Eleanor quickly re-established her presence in the political landscape. She returned to Aquitaine, assuming control over her duchy with remarkable authority. In her absence, local governance had become less efficient, and her return was welcomed by both nobles and administrators. Eleanor understood that her power rested not only on her royal connections, but also on her ability to manage and inspire loyalty among her subjects. Her attention to regional administration, infrastructure, and diplomacy reinforced her standing as a leader who combined strategic acumen with practical governance. Eleanor's renewed influence extended directly to her sons, particularly Richard the Lionheart and John, who had matured during her absence. Richard, now poised to inherit the English throne, benefited from Eleanor's guidance in matters of diplomacy, military strategy, and courtly culture. She had witnessed the dangers of familial rebellion and political fragmentation firsthand, and imparted lessons of caution, foresight, and decisive action. Eleanor's counsel was instrumental in shaping Richard's policies, his conduct as a military leader during the Crusades, and his navigation of alliances across Europe. Her mentorship highlights her enduring role as a matriarch who combined personal devotion with political insight. John, Eleanor's youngest son, also found in his mother a stabilizing influence. Known for his later struggles as King of England, John's early exposure to Eleanor's strategic thinking provided him with a template for governance and negotiation. Eleanor's engagement in her son's affairs extended beyond advice. She mediated disputes, coordinated alliances, and used her personal prestige to bolster their claims. Her presence was a reminder of the intergenerational transmission of power and knowledge, illustrating how women of the medieval period could operate as central nodes in the intricate networks of dynastic politics. Beyond family matters, Eleanor wielded cultural influence that extended across her realms. She championed the arts, supported troubadours, and fostered the courtly traditions that defined the Angevin legacy. Her patronage of literature and music was more than aesthetic. It reinforced social cohesion, reinforced political loyalty, and cultivated a sense of identity among her subjects. Eleanor's court in Aquitaine became a hub of intellectual and artistic activity, attracting poets, scholars, and musicians who contributed to the cultural vibrancy of the region. Through these efforts, Eleanor not only celebrated the human spirit, but also strengthened her own authority by shaping the cultural narrative of her time. Eleanor's role in diplomacy also merits attention. She participated in negotiations with neighboring kingdoms, mediated conflicts among nobles, and served as an envoy in critical political matters. Her knowledge of European courts, combined with her experience navigating the tensions between England and France, made her an indispensable figure in maintaining the balance of power. Eleanor's ability to act as a negotiator, advisor, and strategist underscores the multidimensional nature of her influence, demonstrating that her power was exercised through intellect, diplomacy, and personal networks as much as through titles and formal authority. Her renewed prominence was not without challenges. The tension between her sons, particularly Richard and John, required careful management. Eleanor had to balance competing ambitions, mitigate disputes, and ensure that the interests of the family and realm were safeguarded. Her success in these endeavors reflects a remarkable blend of patience, foresight, and psychological insight. Eleanor understood that power often depends on the subtle orchestration of relationships, timing, and influence, rather than overt displays of force. Her approach anticipated modern concepts of political strategy, making her a figure whose lessons resonate even centuries later. The period following her release also allowed Eleanor to consolidate her legacy. She managed estates, oversaw legal and financial matters, and ensured that her cultural and political contributions endured. Eleanor's vision extended beyond her lifetime. She sought to create a stable framework for her children's rule, a prosperous cultural environment in her duchy, and enduring recognition of her role in shaping European history. Her life after imprisonment illustrates the resilience of a woman who, despite adversity, maintained her agency, expanded her influence, and exercised power in innovative ways. Ultimately, Eleanor of Aquitaine's release, reconciliation with her family, and subsequent activities demonstrate the exceptional scope of her leadership. She seamlessly blended maternal devotion, strategic intelligence, and cultural stewardship to assert authority and shape history. Her return to power highlights a critical lesson. Resilience, adaptability, and insight can restore and even expand influence, even after years of confinement and political turmoil. Eleanor's life after imprisonment underscores her unique ability to navigate the intersecting worlds of family, politics, and culture, leaving a legacy that continues to captivate and inspire. In examining this chapter of Eleanor's life, one recognizes that her influence was enduring and multifaceted. She shaped rulers, guided diplomacy, cultivated culture, and managed territories with skill and vision. Eleanor's story after release challenges assumptions about medieval women's roles, demonstrating that leadership, intellect, and courage were not limited by gender. Her life exemplifies the potential for reinvention, resilience, and enduring impact, a testament to a woman whose power and legacy have echoed through the centuries. Section 7. Governing in Absence. Eleanor and the Crusades. One of the most remarkable aspects of Eleanor of Aquitaine's enduring influence was her ability to govern effectively during her son Richard the Lionheart's absence on the Third Crusade. While many medieval rulers delegated authority to councils or distant relatives, Eleanor personally assumed the responsibilities of administration, diplomacy, and conflict resolution, demonstrating a level of political acumen that was exceptional for her time. Her actions during this period highlight her extraordinary capacity to maintain stability, protect her family's interests, and exert power in an era dominated by male authority. Richard's departure for the Holy Land in 1190 presented a significant challenge. The English crown, as well as the territories of the Angevin Empire in France, were vulnerable to both internal unrest and external opportunism. Nobles, jealous rivals, and neighboring kings were quick to exploit the absence of the monarch. Recognizing the urgency of the situation, Eleanor stepped into a leadership role that required decisiveness, strategic foresight, and the careful balancing of competing interests. Her governance was not merely ceremonial, it was deeply hands-on, involving negotiations, military oversight, and the management of extensive estates across England and Aquitaine. Eleanor's first priority was the protection of her son's inheritance. She worked tirelessly to secure loyalty among nobles who might otherwise have challenged Richard's authority. Letters and directives attributed to Eleanor reveal a ruler who combined diplomacy with firmness, appealing to oaths of fealty, familial duty, and mutual benefit. By ensuring that vassals remained aligned with the crown, Eleanor prevented the fragmentation of the Angevin Empire at a moment when its cohesion was most precarious. Her interventions were not only reactive, but also proactive. She anticipated potential threats and deployed resources strategically, demonstrating a level of foresight that rivaled even the most seasoned male rulers of the period. The management of justice and administration also fell under Eleanor's purview. She presided over courts, resolved disputes among nobles, and oversaw the implementation of laws across the realm. Her knowledge of legal procedures, regional customs, and dynastic protocols allowed her to maintain order without undermining Richard's eventual authority. Eleanor understood that power is as much about perception as action. By administering justice fairly and visibly, she reinforced her legitimacy and strengthened public confidence in the monarchy. Chroniclers of the time often remarked on her wisdom and decisiveness, noting that her leadership kept the kingdom functioning smoothly despite the absence of its reigning king. Eleanor's political skill extended to international diplomacy. France, under the rule of Philip II, was both a rival and a potential ally. Eleanor navigated the complex relationship between England and France with subtlety, using her familial ties, prestige, and strategic insight to mitigate conflict while safeguarding the Angevin interests. She coordinated marriages, managed alliances, and communicated with key figures across Europe, all while maintaining the image of stability within her own territories. Her diplomacy exemplifies a profound understanding of power as a network of relationships, influence, and perception, rather than solely military might. Perhaps most striking was Eleanor's ability to integrate cultural leadership with governance. She recognized that culture and prestige could reinforce political authority. Even during the pressures of war and administration, Eleanor continued to patronize the arts, host courtly events, and encourage intellectual activity. Her court became a center of cultural vitality, attracting poets, musicians, and scholars. These efforts were not mere decoration, they were deliberate strategies to maintain loyalty, project power, and foster a sense of identity among her subjects. Eleanor understood that a ruler's influence was reinforced not only by law and force, but also by the cultivation of shared values and aesthetic sensibilities. Eleanor's leadership was tested repeatedly during this period. Several rebellions and uprisings threatened the stability of her territories. She personally coordinated military responses, delegated commands, and negotiated resolutions that preserved her son's inheritance and the integrity of the realm. Her approach combined firmness with strategic restraint, avoiding unnecessary bloodshed while maintaining authority. Eleanor's actions during these crises demonstrate a rare combination of courage, intelligence, and emotional control, revealing a leader who could act decisively in moments of extreme pressure. In addition to political challenges, Eleanor faced personal risks. Traveling between her estates, negotiating with rival factions, and asserting authority in a male-dominated environment exposed her to threats, both physical and political. Yet she navigated these dangers with a confidence born of experience, familial loyalty, and an acute understanding of human behavior. Eleanor's ability to maintain her influence despite these hazards underscores her resilience and strategic acumen, traits that allowed her to thrive in a world that often underestimated women. Eleanor's governance during Richard's crusade also had a long-term impact on her legacy. By maintaining order, fostering loyalty, and preserving the empire's cohesion, she ensured that her son returned to a stable realm. Her efforts demonstrated that power could be exercised through intellect, negotiation, and strategic foresight, challenging contemporary assumptions about gender and leadership. Eleanor's management of the kingdom in her son's absence illustrates that leadership is multidimensional, encompassing legal, military, cultural, and diplomatic responsibilities, and that effective rulers understand the interconnectedness of these domains. Ultimately, Eleanor's role during the Crusades exemplifies the extraordinary scope of her influence. She navigated complex political landscapes, protected dynastic interests, and ensured the continuity of governance, all while cultivating culture and asserting her authority in subtle yet profound ways. Her ability to operate effectively in her son's absence reflects not only her personal resilience, but also the broader potential for women to shape history, even in periods and societies that constrained their formal power. Eleanor of Aquitaine's leadership during the Crusades remains a testament to the enduring impact of strategic intelligence, vision, and courage. Through her actions, Eleanor showed that leadership is as much about foresight, diplomacy, and cultural influence as it is about direct command. Her stewardship of the kingdom ensured stability during a period of potential chaos, preserved her family's legacy, and reinforced her own authority as one of history's most remarkable female rulers. In examining this chapter of Eleanor's life, it becomes clear that her power was not only resilient, but also transformative, leaving a legacy that would influence the course of European history for generations. Section 8. Eleanor and King John navigating turbulent times. Eleanor of Aquitaine's life was marked by extraordinary longevity, influence, and resilience, but one of the most turbulent chapters unfolded during the reign of her youngest son, King John of England. Following the death of Richard the Lionheart in 1199, Eleanor faced the daunting task of navigating her family's shifting fortunes in a period marked by political intrigue, rebellion, and the ever-present threat of territorial loss. Her role during John's reign demonstrates her enduring political acumen, her skill in mediation, and her capacity to wield influence, even when formal power was increasingly constrained by age and circumstance. King John ascended the throne amid a precarious political landscape. His reputation as a ruler was fragile. He faced hostility from the English barons, challenges from neighboring French monarchs, and skepticism from the church. Eleanor, by this point in her 70s, was a seasoned stateswoman with decades of experience managing dynastic affairs, administering territories, and negotiating delicate political relationships. Despite her advanced age, she continued to exert influence, carefully balancing her maternal authority with strategic intervention to protect her family's interests. One of Eleanor's primary concerns was ensuring the security of her children and the continuity of the Angevin legacy. John's impulsive and often unpredictable behavior posed a threat not only to the stability of the realm, but also to the broader network of territories that had been consolidated under her and her late husband, Henry II. Eleanor acted as a stabilizing force, offering counsel, mediating disputes, and leveraging her reputation to mitigate conflicts. Her experience, wisdom, and prestige made her an invaluable advisor, and even her son John, known for his defiance and volatility, deferred to her judgment on critical matters. Eleanor's influence extended beyond familial mediation. She played a subtle but crucial role in maintaining alliances and negotiating peace with foreign powers, including the French crown. During John's early reign, tensions with King Philip II of France threatened the integrity of the Angevin territories in France. Eleanor's intimate knowledge of the French court, combined with her diplomatic skills, allowed her to act as a conduit between her son and external powers, mitigating some of the diplomatic risks that might otherwise have escalated into open conflict. Her interventions reveal a leader who understood that survival in medieval politics often depended on negotiation, reputation, and the careful management of perception. Her relationship with the English barons was equally critical. John's heavy-handed taxation and arbitrary decisions caused growing unrest among the nobility, which would eventually culminate in the Magna Carta in 1215. Eleanor's presence and mediation helped temper the immediate tensions, as her authority commanded respect that few others could exert. She leveraged her stature and experience to reassure vassals, encourage loyalty, and maintain continuity in governance during periods of instability. Her understanding of the delicate balance between coercion and persuasion reflects a profound awareness of human behavior, political psychology, and the long-term consequences of leadership decisions. Eleanor also continued to oversee her own estates, managing Aquitaine and other territories with efficiency and strategic foresight. These lands were not merely sources of wealth. They were vital centers of power, culture, and influence. Eleanor ensured that her vassals remained loyal, her revenues intact, and her territories protected from opportunistic rivals. Her administrative methods combined practicality with vision, emphasizing both the immediate needs of governance and the cultivation of enduring authority. By maintaining control over her lands, she reinforced her influence over John's reign and preserved the stability of the Angevin Empire during a period of uncertainty. Despite her advancing age, Eleanor's intellectual curiosity and cultural patronage did not wane. She continued to foster artistic and literary activity within her courts, using culture as a subtle instrument of influence. Poetry, music, and scholarship were not merely ornamental. They served to reinforce social bonds, project authority, and cultivate loyalty among nobles and retainers. Eleanor's ability to blend cultural sophistication with political pragmatism underscores her unique approach to power. She understood that authority in the medieval world was multidimensional, encompassing not only force and law, but also prestige, symbolism, and the subtle management of perception. Eleanor's strategic insight also extended to crisis management. Throughout John's reign, rebellions, territorial threats, and internal disputes demanded her intervention. She coordinated responses, negotiated settlements, and used her authority to de-escalate conflicts that might have otherwise spiraled out of control. Her interventions were rarely overtly forceful. Instead, she relied on persuasion, negotiation, and the careful application of moral and social leverage. In this way, Eleanor exemplified a leadership style that was sophisticated, adaptive, and highly effective, even when direct command was limited by circumstance or convention. Family dynamics remained at the center of Eleanor's influence. She nurtured alliances among her children, mediated disputes, and reinforced the hierarchical structure of the Angevin dynasty. Her ability to maintain cohesion within the family was not merely an expression of maternal care. It was a deliberate strategy to preserve political power and ensure the continuity of her lineage. Eleanor understood that dynastic stability was inseparable from political stability, and she devoted her considerable energy and intellect to safeguarding both. Ultimately, Eleanor's role during King John's reign illustrates her remarkable adaptability and enduring influence. Even in the twilight of her life, she remained a pivotal figure in English and French politics, a guardian of dynastic interests and a shaper of historical events. Her ability to navigate turbulent times with wisdom, subtlety, and authority exemplifies the rare combination of intelligence, experience, and resilience that defined her long and impactful life. Through her interventions, Eleanor demonstrated that power was not solely derived from formal authority or youthful vigor. It could also stem from experience, reputation, and the careful exercise of strategic judgment. Her actions during this period underscore the capacity of women in medieval Europe to exert influence, shape political outcomes, and leave enduring legacies, even within structures that often sought to limit their formal power. Eleanor's story during John's reign reaffirms her status as one of history's most remarkable and capable leaders, whose vision and intellect left an indelible mark on the political landscape of her time. Section 9. Eleanor's legacy through her grandchildren. As Eleanor of Aquitaine entered the final decades of her remarkable life, her focus gradually shifted from direct political maneuvering to the careful cultivation of her family's legacy through the next generation. Her children had long reached maturity, and the turbulent reigns of Richard the Lionheart and King John had left a complex inheritance of both power and peril. Eleanor, ever the strategist, recognized that the survival and flourishing of the Angevin dynasty depended not merely on immediate political victories, but on the wisdom, alliances, and character of her grandchildren. In this period, Eleanor's role transformed from queen consort and mother to an influential matriarch and mentor, guiding the young members of her lineage in ways both subtle and profound. The responsibility of shaping her grandchildren's upbringing was immense. By this time, Eleanor had witnessed the precariousness of power firsthand, the fragility of loyalty among nobles, the volatility of kings, and the consequences of unchecked ambition. She understood that the next generation would inherit a web of obligations, expectations, and rivalries that could determine the future of her family's territories. Eleanor's influence, therefore, was directed not merely toward ensuring obedience, but toward instilling in her grandchildren a sense of duty, strategic thinking, and awareness of the broader political landscape. One of Eleanor's key strategies involved fostering education and cultural refinement. She recognized that leadership extended beyond the battlefield or the throne. It encompassed the ability to navigate courtly culture, diplomacy, and public perception. Under her guidance, her grandchildren received instruction in literature, languages, etiquette, and the intricacies of medieval governance. This emphasis on learning was not purely decorative. It was a deliberate cultivation of intellect and judgment, equipping the next generation with the tools necessary to maintain and expand their family's influence. Eleanor also imparted lessons in diplomacy through example and direct counsel. She shared stories of her own experiences, navigating 2 marriages, managing vast territories, and balancing competing allegiances to illustrate the importance of prudence, patience, and negotiation. Her grandchildren were encouraged to observe the nuances of courtly behavior, understand the motives of allies and rivals, and recognize the long-term consequences of their decisions. Eleanor's mentorship emphasized that power was not simply taken. It was maintained through skillful management of relationships, perception, and strategic foresight. In addition to cultural and political education, Eleanor carefully shaped her grandchildren's marital alliances. She understood that strategic marriages were among the most powerful instruments of medieval diplomacy, capable of securing loyalty, forging alliances, and consolidating territory. Eleanor's intimate knowledge of European courts, combined with her keen insight into familial networks, allowed her to advise and sometimes orchestrate marriages that strengthened her lineage. By controlling, guiding, or influencing these unions, she extended her authority beyond her immediate sphere and ensured that her family's influence would ripple across generations. Eleanor's mentorship also included moral and ethical guidance. Having observed the destructive consequences of unchecked ambition, betrayal, and impulsive behavior among her contemporaries, she emphasized the importance of responsibility, honor, and foresight. Through stories of her own triumphs and missteps, she instilled in her grandchildren an understanding that true leadership required a balance of courage and caution, strength and wisdom. This moral dimension of Eleanor's influence was as crucial as her political guidance, shaping not only the decisions her grandchildren would make, but also the character with which they would confront challenges. Her role as a matriarch extended beyond her immediate family. Eleanor's court became a center for nurturing future leaders, not only her grandchildren, but also their retainers and allies. By cultivating a culture of loyalty, intellect, and refinement, she created an environment in which her family's legacy could thrive. This broader influence ensured that the principles, values, and strategic acumen she imparted would resonate through the extended network of nobles and retainers, reinforcing the stability and reach of the Angevin dynasty. Eleanor's influence was not without challenges. The political landscape of early 13th century Europe remained unstable, and her grandchildren faced threats from rivals, internal dissent, and the lingering consequences of John's turbulent reign. Eleanor's guidance had to navigate these hazards, often requiring delicate intervention and careful assessment of risk. Her reputation, accumulated over decades of leadership, enabled her to mediate disputes, counsel prudence, and project authority, even when formal power had begun to wane. She became a stabilizing force, offering wisdom that tempered youthful ambition and mitigated potential crises. Beyond politics and strategy, Eleanor's mentorship emphasized resilience and adaptability. She had witnessed firsthand how fortunes could change rapidly, how rebellions could upend empires, and how unexpected events could threaten even the most secure realms. Her grandchildren were encouraged to develop resilience, learn from adversity, and anticipate challenges before they became crises. Eleanor's long life provided a living example of endurance, patience, and the value of learning from experience, a model that her grandchildren were expected to emulate in their own journeys as leaders. Importantly, Eleanor's engagement with her grandchildren extended to fostering a sense of identity and belonging. She imbued them with an awareness of the family's illustrious history, its triumphs and struggles, and the responsibilities that came with their lineage. Through storytelling, instruction, and active mentorship, Eleanor cultivated pride, loyalty, and a deep understanding of the familial and historical context in which her grandchildren would operate. This sense of heritage became a source of strength, shaping their worldview and anchoring their decisions in a broader narrative of legacy and duty. Ultimately, Eleanor's efforts to guide her grandchildren exemplify the long-term perspective that defined her approach to power. While much of medieval history focuses on battles, conquests, and immediate political maneuvering, Eleanor's attention to the next generation reflects a strategic vision that extended across decades. She understood that the survival and prosperity of her family depended not only on immediate victories, but also on cultivating wisdom, alliances, and character that would endure beyond her own lifetime. Through her mentorship, Eleanor of Aquitaine ensured that her influence would persist even as the vicissitudes of history continued to unfold. Her grandchildren became carriers of her legacy, embodying the lessons of diplomacy, prudence, resilience, and cultural refinement that she had imparted. In this way, Eleanor's remarkable life, spanning over 80 years, left a lasting imprint on the medieval world, not merely through her own actions, but through the enduring impact of the next generation she nurtured, guided, and inspired. Section 11. Eleanor's influence on European politics after her death. Even after Eleanor of Aquitaine passed away in 1204, the ripples of her influence continued to shape European politics in profound and unexpected ways. Unlike many figures whose power is tied solely to their lifetime, Eleanor's strategic foresight, carefully arranged alliances, and the legacy of her children ensured that her imprint on medieval politics extended decades beyond her death. Examining her posthumous influence reveals not only the enduring power of her family networks, but also the subtle ways in which her decisions and guidance continued to impact the trajectory of kingdoms, marriages, and alliances across Europe. One of the most direct manifestations of Eleanor's influence after her death was through her children and grandchildren, many of whom held positions of immense power. Her sons, Richard the Lionheart and King John of England inherited not only crowns, but also the political strategies, lessons in diplomacy, and resilience that Eleanor had instilled in them. Richard's martial prowess and charisma, often celebrated in chronicles, were complemented by his mother's meticulous preparation, which included training in governance, negotiation, and understanding the complexities of European feudal relationships. John, while often criticized for his failures, nonetheless relied on the structures and alliances carefully established by Eleanor, which delayed the collapse of Angevin influence despite his missteps. Eleanor's daughters also served as critical conduits of her enduring influence. Through their marriages into various European noble houses, these daughters extended the reach of Angevin diplomacy, creating bonds that stabilized relationships between rival courts and fostered strategic alliances. Marital connections, orchestrated under Eleanor's watchful eye during her life, continued to shape political landscapes after her death. Queens and princesses in medieval Europe often wielded soft power through correspondence, mediation, and patronage, and Eleanor's daughters exemplified this practice, embodying her legacy in their roles as intermediaries, advisors, and cultural patrons. The political legacy Eleanor left behind was also tangible in the governance structures she helped establish. During her lifetime, she had been instrumental in managing vast estates, overseeing vassal obligations, and arbitrating disputes across the Angevin domains. The systems she implemented for administration, taxation, etc., and legal oversight persisted after her death, forming a backbone of political stability that her children and successors relied upon. These frameworks enabled the Angevin dynasty to maintain coherence despite the frequent conflicts, rebellions, and power struggles characteristic of medieval Europe. Eleanor's foresight in creating resilient administrative mechanisms illustrates her long-term vision, proving that power can endure not just through armies and wealth, but through institutional stability. Culturally, Eleanor's influence continued to shape courts and intellectual life across Europe. Her patronage of poets, troubadours, and scholars set standards for courtly culture that persisted well after her death. These cultural contributions were not merely decorative. They functioned as subtle tools of political influence, fostering shared values, norms, and networks among the nobility. Courts influenced by Eleanor's taste in literature, music, and art often became centers of diplomacy and negotiation, reflecting the broader social and political consequences of her cultural stewardship. In this way, Eleanor's impact extended far beyond her immediate family and court, shaping the environment in which European leaders operated for generations. The consequences of Eleanor's legacy also manifested in conflicts and negotiations over succession and territory. Her careful planning during her life often determined the outcomes of disputes after her death. The stability or instability of kingdoms, the outcomes of territorial claims, and the alignment of powerful nobles often hinged upon the alliances and structures she had put in place. Even the infamous tensions between her sons, Richard and John, while complex, were mediated within a context defined by Eleanor's earlier guidance and strategic decisions. Her influence on succession, governance, and alliances highlights the extent to which a single figure can shape the political landscape through preparation, foresight, and careful cultivation of networks. Historians often emphasize that Eleanor's posthumous influence extended beyond concrete politics into the realm of historical memory and perception. Chroniclers, poets, and later historians frequently depicted her as a model of female authority, intelligence, and resilience. By documenting her accomplishments, they ensured that Eleanor's strategies, decisions, and personality would continue to inform political thought, cultural norms, and scholarly discourse. Her life became a template for evaluating the role of women in positions of power, illustrating the potential for influence beyond formal office and demonstrating the capacity for long-term strategic thinking in shaping historical outcomes. Moreover, Eleanor's legacy played a role in shaping perceptions of monarchy and governance in the broader European context. The Angevin dynasty, with its cross-channel holdings in England and France, presented unique challenges in coordination, loyalty, and administration. Eleanor's approach, combining diplomacy, family guidance, and cultural influence, provided a model for managing such complexities. Subsequent monarchs and political actors could look to her example as a guide for navigating multi-regional power structures, balancing military force with diplomacy, and leveraging familial and cultural influence to maintain stability and cohesion. Even centuries later, Eleanor's enduring presence can be traced in the symbolic and institutional structures she helped shape. Churches, monasteries, and estates she patronized continued to function as centers of influence, perpetuating the norms, values, and networks she had fostered. These institutions not only memorialized her contributions, but also actively facilitated ongoing political and social activity, providing platforms through which her vision continued to resonate in the decisions of subsequent generations. In summary, Eleanor of Aquitaine's influence after her death was far from passive. Through her children, administrative structures, cultural patronage, and enduring networks of alliance, she continued to shape European politics, society, and cultural life. Her life demonstrates that true influence extends beyond immediate authority, persisting through careful planning, mentorship, and strategic cultivation of relationships. Eleanor's posthumous impact exemplifies how visionary leadership, coupled with thoughtful engagement in governance, culture, and family, can create a legacy that resonates across decades and centuries, transforming the trajectory of nations long after the individual who set it in motion has passed from the stage of history. Section 12. Eleanor's influence on culture, literature, and the arts across Europe. Eleanor of Aquitaine's legacy extended far beyond politics and diplomacy. It was deeply imprinted on the cultural and artistic life of medieval Europe. As a patron of poets, musicians, troubadours, and scholars, Eleanor cultivated a court environment that nurtured creativity, promoted intellectual exchange, and influenced the cultural landscape of not just her own realms, but the wider European context. Her appreciation for literature, music, and the arts was not purely aesthetic. It functioned as a strategic instrument of influence, shaping social norms, reinforcing alliances, and establishing models of behavior that resonated across generations. Eleanor's passion for literature, particularly the works of troubadours and courtly poets, was revolutionary for her time. The courts she established or influenced became centers of cultural production, where stories of chivalry, honor, love, and loyalty were shared, performed, and celebrated. Eleanor herself was known to engage with these works, demonstrating not only personal literacy and sophistication, but also an understanding of the power of narrative to shape perception and values. The themes celebrated in these works, courage, eloquence, courtly love, reinforced ideals that supported the social hierarchy, encouraged loyalty, and created a shared cultural vocabulary among the nobility. One of Eleanor's most significant contributions to European culture was her patronage of the troubadour tradition in southern France. Troubadours were poet-musicians who composed in Aquitaine, crafting intricate lyrical poetry that often explored the themes of love, honor, and personal valor. Eleanor's support for these artists encouraged the proliferation of their work and elevated the cultural prestige of the courts she influenced. By fostering this vibrant literary environment, she not only enriched the intellectual life of her own courts, but also facilitated the spread of these cultural forms throughout Europe, influencing both the French and English literary traditions. Eleanor's influence on literature was closely intertwined with her political strategies. By promoting works that emphasized ideals such as loyalty, bravery, and ethical conduct, she subtly reinforced the values she sought to instill within her family and among her allies. Literature became a vehicle through which social cohesion and political ideals were reinforced, and Eleanor's court exemplified this dynamic. Poets and musicians often celebrated her family and her own virtues, turning artistic expression into a tool of political and social reinforcement. In this way, Eleanor demonstrated a rare understanding of the interplay between art and authority, harnessing cultural production to strengthen dynastic legitimacy and social networks. Music was another realm where Eleanor's influence was both profound and lasting. The courts under her guidance featured performances that combined poetry, song, and instrumental accompaniment, creating experiences that were both entertaining and instructive. The music performed at Eleanor's court often carried symbolic messages, celebrating heroism, courtly love, and the social order. By endorsing this artistic form, Eleanor helped establish the cultural norms of elite medieval society, influencing the development of musical traditions that would persist for centuries. Her patronage also encouraged experimentation, blending regional styles and instruments, which contributed to the richness and diversity of medieval European music. Eleanor's impact on culture extended beyond literary and musical patronage to visual arts and architecture. She commissioned and inspired works that reflected the grandeur of her position and the sophistication of her taste. Manuscripts illuminated under her patronage, for instance, often combined intricate artistry with literary richness, serving both as cultural treasures and as symbols of power. Architectural projects, from expansions of palaces to embellishments of religious institutions, demonstrated a keen awareness of the ways in which aesthetic splendor could reinforce authority and convey social and spiritual messages. Through these endeavors, Eleanor ensured that her legacy would be tangible not only in written and performed works, but also in spaces and objects that symbolized her influence and vision. The dissemination of culture from Eleanor's courts had ripple effects across Europe. Her daughters and their marriages into other royal and noble houses served as conduits for the transmission of literary, musical, and artistic traditions. Courts in distant regions adopted styles, themes, and practices that had been cultivated under Eleanor's guidance, creating a web of cultural influence that transcended geographic boundaries. In this way, Eleanor acted as both a local patron and a continental cultural architect, shaping the aesthetic sensibilities of an era and influencing the development of European high culture for generations. Eleanor's cultural influence also intersected with education and intellectual life. Her court encouraged scholarly engagement and the study of languages, philosophy, and the liberal arts, providing a model for intellectual sophistication that combined aesthetic appreciation with strategic thinking. This environment fostered the exchange of ideas and reinforced the social and political hierarchies she sought to maintain. Scholars, poets, and artists operating within her networks often played roles in advising rulers, mediating disputes, and crafting narratives that supported Eleanor's broader objectives, illustrating the multifunctional nature of culture as both an artistic and political force. In addition, Eleanor's personal engagement with the arts inspired a broader appreciation of female intellectual and creative agency. As a woman of exceptional intelligence and taste, she modeled how female patrons could wield cultural influence alongside political power. Her life challenged contemporary assumptions about gender roles and demonstrated that women could shape the intellectual, artistic, and moral fabric of society. Subsequent generations of noble women emulated her example, perpetuating a tradition of female patronage and cultural leadership that would endure long after her passing. Ultimately, Eleanor of Aquitaine's influence on culture, literature, and the arts was inseparable from her political vision. She understood that culture was not merely a reflection of power, but a mechanism through which power could be exercised, transmitted, and legitimized. By cultivating literary, musical, and artistic excellence, she shaped not only the tastes of her contemporaries, but also the social norms, values, and intellectual currents that would guide European courts for generations. Eleanor's legacy in this realm underscores the profound and enduring power of cultural patronage, illustrating that the most lasting influence often resides not in force or conquest, but in the ideas, stories, and artistic expressions that shape a society's imagination and identity. Section 13. Eleanor's enduring legacy. Power, influence, and memory. Eleanor of Aquitaine's life, spanning nearly a century, offers a remarkable study in the exercise of power, the cultivation of culture, and the strategic navigation of social, political, and familial dynamics. Her story reflects the complexities of medieval society, where authority was often contested and where influence could be exercised not only through conquest or governance, but through alliances, patronage, and cultural leadership. As she approached the final years of her life, Eleanor's legacy had already been firmly established. Yet the enduring impact of her choices, vision, and leadership continued to resonate across the kingdoms she shaped. The families she guided, and the cultural currents she helped define. In her later years, Eleanor retired to the courts of Poitiers, but retirement did not signify inactivity or irrelevance. She remained an active participant in political and social matters, offering counsel to her sons and grandchildren, and mediating disputes across the Plantagenet and Capetian spheres. Her influence extended beyond the immediate political realm into the cultural, moral, and intellectual life of her domains. Through correspondence, patronage, and personal example, Eleanor continued to shape the values, decisions, and ambitions of those around her. Her capacity to maintain authority and respect well into advanced age demonstrates not only resilience, but also a nuanced understanding of the interplay between reputation, influence, and personal conduct. Eleanor's enduring legacy is particularly evident in the dynastic achievements of her children. Her sons, Richard the Lionheart and King John of England, carried forward aspects of her political vision, while her daughters, such as Marie of Champagne and Alix of France, acted as conduits for the spread of her cultural and social influence across European courts. These alliances reinforced Eleanor's vision of a connected and culturally sophisticated Europe, where values of chivalry, patronage, and learnedness were shared among ruling elites. Her daughters' marriages, often strategic and politically motivated, exemplify Eleanor's skill in using family ties to extend influence, shaping both local and continental power structures long after her direct involvement had ended. Culturally, Eleanor's influence persisted in the literary, musical, and artistic forms she championed. The troubadours, poets, and scholars she supported continued to inspire creativity in successive generations, and the courtly ideals of chivalry, honor, and love that flourished under her patronage became embedded in European cultural consciousness. The physical and literary artifacts associated with her, illuminated manuscripts, architectural embellishments, commissioned works, and written accounts, serve as enduring testimony to her taste, intelligence, and vision. Through these cultural imprints, Eleanor's presence extended beyond her lifetime, shaping not only contemporary society, but also the historical imagination of subsequent centuries. Eleanor's life also provides a model of female agency and leadership in a period dominated by male authority. She demonstrated that power could be exercised effectively and decisively by a woman through strategic insight, intelligence, and the cultivation of alliances. Her ability to navigate the intricacies of European politics, her strategic use of family connections, and her support of cultural and intellectual life all underscore a multifaceted approach to influence. Eleanor's example challenges simplistic assumptions about gender roles in medieval society and highlights the potential for women to shape history, culture, and power structures in ways that resonate far beyond their immediate context. The historical memory of Eleanor has been shaped both by contemporary accounts and by later interpretations. Chroniclers often emphasized her intelligence, beauty, and political acumen, yet also portrayed her with ambivalence, reflecting the complexities of female authority in a patriarchal context. Modern historians, however, have reevaluated her life with greater nuance, emphasizing her agency, her strategic brilliance, and her cultural contributions. Eleanor is remembered not simply as a queen or consort, but as a transformative figure whose decisions, patronage, and vision left an indelible mark on European history. Eleanor's personal qualities, resilience, intelligence, cultural sensitivity, and political acumen allowed her to navigate crises that might have undone lesser figures. From surviving marital conflict and imprisonment to actively influencing political affairs across multiple kingdoms, she demonstrated a rare combination of personal strength and strategic foresight. Her ability to maintain relevance, respect, and influence over decades of political upheaval underscores the depth of her understanding of power as both an instrument and a relationship, one that depended not solely on force or position, but on respect, reputation, and strategic alliances. Ultimately, Eleanor of Aquitaine's life illustrates how influence can take many forms and how leadership is not limited to formal authority. She shaped history through her children, her patronage, her cultural vision, and her ability to negotiate complex social and political landscapes. Her legacy is multidimensional. She was a queen, a mother, a patron, a diplomat, and a cultural icon. Each of these roles contributed to a lasting impact that extended far beyond her lifetime, creating ripples that influenced European politics, culture, and society for generations. Eleanor's story reminds us that the true measure of power is not always conquest or dominion, but the ability to shape thought, culture, and values, an influence that endures long after rulers have left the stage. As we reflect on Eleanor's extraordinary life, we see the enduring power of intellect, vision, and cultural engagement. Her legacy continues to inspire admiration for the capacity of individuals to shape history through both action and ideas. In celebrating Eleanor of Aquitaine, we honor a figure whose intelligence, creativity, and strategic brilliance remind us that history is often guided as much by vision and culture as by swords and crowns.